Outsourcing tends to have a bad reputation as being low quality. Partner Hero's value-based approach raises the bar for the outsourcing industry by investing in employee empowerment and career growth, paying above-market salaries, and maintaining a focus on quality and performance. They're more than a service provider. They're also a thought partner for the startups they serve. It's simple. Brands that care about quality customer experience choose Partner Hero. They offer flexible terms and the ability to scale quickly, perfect for startups, with quality assurance baked into every program and offices around the world. So Partner Hero can provide truly global coverage. Outsourcing has long been available mainly to big businesses, but Partner Hero is challenging business as usual by bringing the benefits of outsourcing to businesses of all sizes with short, flexible contracts and fast ramp-up times. 10 years ago, when we were launching the Action Catalyst, we could have used a few extra hands to help us scale quickly, even if it was just for a short while. You can bet that with their expertise, fast onboarding, and core focus on quality, Partner Hero would have had our attention. If you're ready to bring in outside customer support help for your startup that feels like it's a part of an existing team, check out Partner Hero. Head over to partnerhero.com/Action Catalyst to book a free consultation with our solutions team. Mention you heard about Partner Hero from the Action Catalyst, and they'll even waive the setup fee. Now, on to the show.
From Nashville, Tennessee, Southwestern Family of Companies welcomes you to the Action Catalyst. Each week, we share insights and inspiration from movers and shakers in the world of business. Our goal is to help you increase your self-discipline, overcome procrastination, and help you to take action on all the things that really matter.
Great episode for you today. One of my favorite, certainly in recent episodes, or just over, this is just a great one. It's just a good one. They're all good, but like this one is great. And we're talking about the power of positive leadership. My good friend, Jon Gordon, one of the best-selling authors and leadership thinkers in our time, is here. And we're having a chat about his new book. And it's powerful for me, like a personal breakthrough. And I'm going to walk you through some of my breakthroughs at the end when I debrief some of the stuff I learned. In fact, there's these 5 misconceptions of what it means to be positive as a leader specifically that I'm going to break down for you and explain to you how I've done it wrong and a little bit about why I've done it wrong, and then also what I am learning from Jon and other mentors of mine in my life and other places. But boy, this is an important episode, and if you need a pick-me-up, this is definitely a good one. But also, if you're a realist and you pride yourself on being realist and sort of being neutral and not being positive, but just sort of staying in that even keel, this is a key, very important episode for you. So I hope you love it. I think that you're going to. I feel confident that you will. We'll get started just after this message.
This episode is sponsored by Southwestern Coaching. Southwestern Coaching has helped over 11,000 people increase their incomes by over 25% on average. As a successful salesperson, you know the importance of increasing your sales, but sometimes you might just need a little extra push and accountability to meet your goals and grow your business. Southwestern Coaching will help you increase your income through one-on-one sales and leadership coaching tailored specifically to your needs. Together, we will elevate sales. To schedule your free one-on-one business action planning session with a Southwestern coach, go to www.southwesternconsulting.com/action catalyst.
He is just one of the most genuine, like down-to-earth, coolest guys ever. And I'm sure you've probably heard of the Energy Bus. That is, he's got lots of books. That one is like uber famous and continues to stay on the bestseller list week after week after week. But he also wrote The Carpenter. He wrote The Seed. He wrote You Win in the Locker Room First. And he works with a number of the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball teams, Fortune 500. And just an awesome guy. And he has a brand new book that is out called The Power of Positive Leadership. And so that's why we brought him back on the show. Jon, welcome back, brother.
Great to be back with you. Thanks for having me back.
So tell me about the new book. Like, what's this all about? Like, why now? Power of Positive Leadership. Like, where did the inspiration come from?
So I wrote The Energy Bus in 2006. It came out in 2007. And for the past 10 years, I've been speaking on, the power of positive leadership. I've actually been giving these talks on the energy bus and leading with more optimism and belief and positivity and loving your passengers and building a great positive culture. And this book was really the culmination of all that I've learned over the past 10 years, working with businesses, working with sports teams, working with all these great leaders. Like, I've had the opportunity to work with so many great leaders like Dabo Sweeney or Doug Conan at Campbell Soup. And I've also, worked with great companies like you have, Southwest Airlines, and just recently worked with Dell and, the merger with EMC. So you get the opportunity to work with these great leaders. And I started to think about, positive leaders are the ones who change the world. They're the ones who transform teams and organizations. So this book is really all that I've learned in the last 10 years from these leaders. And then I also interviewed a bunch of great ones as well for this book.
And so, define, what exactly is positive leadership? Obviously those are two very, very common words, but when you bring them together, how do you define what makes positive leadership, or perhaps maybe even more important, what is not positive leadership?
Naysayers talk about problems, but they don't solve them. It's the positive leaders who change the world. It's the positive leaders who transform their teams and their organizations. So, when people hear the words positive, they often roll their eyes, right? They think we're talking about Pollyanna positive, where life is full of unicorns and rainbows. But, when I wrote this book, I really wanted to make it clear that, we are positive not because life is easy. We're positive because life is hard. We're positive because you will face all sorts of adversity, challenges, obstacles, and setbacks. And as a leader, you need to maintain optimistic in order to lead your team forward. You have to have a vision of where you want to go. You have to have a bigger purpose that ultimately drives you. So this is a book that includes a framework of 9 characteristics, 9 things that positive leaders do. And then each chapter is one of those 9 things broken down into smaller parts.
So, yeah, and I want to touch, maybe we'll get a chance to go through a couple of those, but you mentioned that sometimes people roll their eyes when they hear positive leadership. I mean, right. Isn't this kind of cheesy? But you're saying that it shouldn't be cheesy. You're saying that this is what really works in the world, and that it's one of the it's like a necessary component of what makes great leaders.
Exactly. This is what makes great leaders great. My favorite feedback from this book so far is that almost everyone who's read it said, I thought it was going to be one thing, but it turned out to be another. And what it turned out to be was very real, very grounded, a lot of great examples of leaders and how they've led, how they've changed the world, how they've won national championships. Dabo Sweeney, for instance, worked with Clemson for the past 5 years. Incredible positive leader. Alan Mulally turned around Ford in 2006. They were losing $14 billion. Had them profitable in a few years. One of the greatest leadership feats in history. People talk about how he did it. It was unbelievable. I interviewed him for this book. This book would not have been great without Alan's information, because he defines his leadership as positive leadership. He's like, you got to love him up, John. You got to love him up, but you got to have him. You got to hold him accountable to the process. A lot of love and a lot of accountability. He centralized Ford. Ford was very regionalized. He centralized them to become one team, one Ford, with one goal and one plan. He said everyone had to know the plan, embrace the plan, and relentlessly work towards the plan. And that's another key. It's about being demanding, but not being demeaning. Positive leaders pursue excellence. They want to achieve greatness because they believe in a brighter and better future. They're like, okay, hey, let's create it. And that often includes innovation. It includes a focus on excellence, a passion and desire to be your best, because you can't create a great future if you're not working hard for it. But you also have to be optimistic and positive as you work hard. So that's what I love about this. People are saying, the research in it, the examples, and really dealing with the negativity that exists in a very practical way. This makes this a book that's not pie in the sky, not theory, not Pollyanna. This is real stuff.
So what about realism? So I think, you have these great case studies in the book of not like leaders that you never heard of. I mean, Ford and national championship teams and stuff, where they're saying, look, this is a key to how we lead and why we win. Where does realism come into the picture? Because I think, a lot of times leaders, they're sort of like these great administrators, they're executive types that sometimes really have a strong maybe accounting background or more of a logical background. And they would say, well, what about realism, Jon? Like, how do you reconcile those two dynamics?
Well, you don't have to be an extrovert to be a positive leader. You can be an introvert first off, and I think it's important that we address that because people think positive leadership means you're bouncing off the walls, you're high energy. No, it's really from your essence of how you lead, the love you have, the passion you have from inside you. So it's not anything that you necessarily do, on the outside in an energetic or frenetic way. But there's something about positive leadership that says, I believe in a brighter and better future. So yes, these are challenges. We do address them in a realistic way. We confront the reality that exists. But because we're optimistic, because we're positive, we're finding ways and we're finding solutions to help be successful in the future. You talked about what positive leadership is not earlier. It's not pessimistic. It's not a complainer. If you're complaining, you're not leading. Complainers focus on problems. Positive leaders focus on solutions. So we have to understand too that it's all about, it's subjective. It's never objective. You talk about realism. People say, I'm just being a realist. I'm just being a realist. Sure. Well, yeah, you're being a realist, but guess what? Time and time again, Steve Jobs' team would say it was impossible to create the software, the hardware that he wanted created. They talked about this in his biography. They called it his reality distortion field. And time again, he would actually convince them they could do it. They said he distorted their reality from pessimism, or some would say realism, to optimism. And then time again, they accomplished the very thing that they thought was impossible because of his optimism. So leaders lead with this faith. They lead with belief. They lead with what's possible. So I think it's often dangerous to say, I'm just being a realist. I think it's okay to confront the reality, but why not say we can find a way to make it happen? When you looked at Ford, for instance, during the Great Recession, they had done everything right. They had done the restructuring. They were making great products now. They had a great platform for the Ford vehicles. Alan did everything right, and yet the Great Recession hit, and it looked like it was all for naught. But did they wallow? Did they complain? Alan Lally said, wallowing is not an option. Complaining is not a plan. We have a plan, and we'll continue to work towards it. If we have to adjust, we will, but positive leaders find a way forward. And without him, Ford doesn't turn it around. Without him, Ford doesn't save hundreds of thousands of jobs. Ford doesn't make it back, and they just actually had a profitable run of 10 billion just recently. So it's incredible of what they're doing and how they're accomplishing great things because of his leadership.
Yeah.
So what happens if a realist was in his role? In his role, what happened if that was the case?
So you mentioned some of the characteristics. I love this. I mean, there's just so many. It's dangerous to be a realist. Complaining is not a plan. If you're complaining, you're not leading. I mean, these are really, really powerful points. And I think it's almost like realism is the analytics excuse for complaining. It's like that's the justification that they use a lot, and so I think that's really powerful. So
I told my dad I want to be a writer and speaker. His response was, "What the heck you want to do that for? That's a load of junk. That wouldn't amount to anything." My dad was a New York City police officer. In his mind, like, no, you focus on your restaurant. At the time I owned a restaurant. That's something that's real. That's something you can make money at. Writing and speaking, doing that for a living. For him, he was being a realist. He wasn't even trying to be negative. He was just being a realist of how he saw the world. But I didn't see the world as he saw it. I saw it through an optimistic lens, and I pursued my passion with a vision. I think that's a very real example that we confront all the time. Now, will I ever play in the NBA? I could say, I'm going to go play in the NBA right now. That is not being realistic, and that is not even optimistic. That is a pipe dream. So I think you have to...
What's the difference?
It's so hard to identify what the difference is. The difference is when my son is growing up and he's a tennis player and he says, I want to play professional tennis. And I say to him, you know what? If you have a dream, work towards it. Let's see what God has in store. Let's see what the plan is. But should I ever crush his dream and said, that's not realistic? No. So I believe you have a dream, you go for it. As he gets older, you'll start to see if that's now possible, if that's realistic. Now he's a junior, right, in high school. We're starting to see, is it possible? Still too early to tell because he's good, but he's not great. But they say he has a lot of potential. So he could become great over the next couple of years. So I'm never going to shoot it down. I'm never going to say that's not a possibility. You see what happens, and then you trust that God has a plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how I view it anyway.
Yeah, well, and I was just thinking through that with you. It's kind of like, optimism isn't guaranteeing that the dream is going to come true. Optimism is saying, how can we move in that direction? Versus saying it's impossible or, that's not likely. It's like you're moving forward and you're being enthusiastic and you're being, positive. You're being encouraging that, hey, let's focus on what we can do and not what we can't do. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Very much so. I just love the way you put that. So being positive doesn't guarantee you'll succeed, but being negative will guarantee you won't. So we're not saying, hey, you just be positive and anything can happen. No, I like what Max Lucado said. He said, you can't be everything or anything you want to be because you really can't. But you could be everything that ultimately God created you to be. Mm-hmm. And so you trust that there's a plan. You work hard towards it. You believe. You put it out there. And then you see what happens. But you shouldn't ever not go after your goals because you're being a realist. Like, you know what? People from our family don't achieve success like that. People from our part of the neighborhood and our part of the town don't go after dreams like that. People in our family don't go to college. Over and over again, you'll hear things like that from people. And that's why I say it's dangerous to tell people what they can't do. The world needs more encouragers, believers, inspirers to inspire people, to encourage them to what they can do. But then someone say, it's dangerous to tell someone to go out to California and pursue their dream of acting. They could fail and come back and be miserable. Only if they allow that failure to define them.
Right.
And so if it's an experience that you get pursuing something and you don't succeed, then you don't succeed. My brother was an actor right out of college. He pursued acting. He worked in New York City. He bartended for years while he pursued acting. He never made it and was never a huge success with acting. He never really also committed to being great. That's part of the journey. But he then got into sales, became very successful in sales. Then he actually went to consulting, and now he's the chief marketing officer of a company. It's unbelievable how his path has moved forward, but I would have never told him don't pursue acting because the odds of being a successful actor, is minuscule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's almost like God leads you down a hallway and you're heading towards a door at the end of the hallway, and that's what you think you're supposed to do, but right before you get there, God opens another door on the side that you wouldn't have been able to see if you were standing still and you never started walking down the hallway. So like the door you were going after didn't end up being the door you walked through, but there was a better door that you just couldn't see until you moved further down the hallway.
Exactly. And when Dabo Swinney, for instance, was fired as a coach, in Alabama, the whole coaching staff was fired. He went into real estate, for a couple of years, and then went back to pursue coaching. Now, if he was a pessimist, he would say, you know what, that coaching thing, I don't want to lose my job again. I'm not going to go after it. He said, no, the best is yet to come. I'm going for it. So now he's a wide receivers coach and a recruiting coordinator at Clemson. Then he gets the job as the head coach because Tommy Bowden was let go. And so now he steps into this opportunity. He meets with the board of trustees, and the board of trustees says, we want to create a program, a football program that's like Florida, that's like Michigan. We want to be like them. And Dabo's in that meeting, and he says, sir, I respectfully disagree, but my vision is so much bigger than that. I want to create a program where they want to be like us. That's my vision. And so here he was now saying this. They probably thought this guy is crazy, right? This guy is full of, pipe dreams. He's got a lot of words, but let's see what happens. Yeah, sure, Dabo, thanks. We'll see you in a couple of years when you're, not coaching here anymore. But he believed. And then he walks into the room with a sign that said, I can't, with a T crossed out, and another sign that said believe. And he starts to instill that program with belief that they can be great, belief that they can be the best. Now, they had some couple good seasons, but they go 6-7 in 2010. Was almost fired, but wasn't. AD still believed in him. After that, 10 or more wins every year, with a run up to the national championship and winning the national championship this year. People outside the program never thought this was possible. Many inside probably never thought this was possible. But his one belief, this one man's positive leadership changed everything.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I think sometimes the biggest challenge, it's one thing when people outside don't believe, right? Like people outside that don't really know you, they don't really know what's going on. They go, oh yeah, that's the pipe dreams, or that's stupid, that'll never happen, blah, blah, blah. But, and that it kind of affects us. Hopefully it doesn't, like if you're being positive. But what about when people internally don't believe? Like what about when you're either inserted as a new leader, or you just wake up one day and you go, man, we have to change things around here. But you're running into resistance internally where people are just, they're resistant. They're not into it. Like, what are some of the things you can do as a leader to sort of transform things from the inside? I mean, I know you go through this in the book in detail, but just give us a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because it is in the book of what people can do. So it's in the book. But key story, Donna Orander takes over the WNBA. She had left the PGA Tour to take over the WNBA to become the commissioner. There was so much negativity in the WNBA. There was a lack of belief that people cared about women's basketball. There was a belief that they didn't care. There was a lack of optimism of what it could be. But Donna saw the passion in the players and the coaches, and she believed that the WNBA could be something special. So she said, you start with the believers. There are those core group of people that believe, and you get them on your bus first and foremost, and you really energize and inspire them to move forward. Then you have some wins. You actually create a few wins here and there. Then you have to reach the next level of believers, and that happens when you show proof of concept. You show that success. You show what is being accomplished. And that might be in a football season, you have some more wins every year, and so people start to see that success. So now you get the next level of believers on your bus, and now they're believing. And then the next level are the people that don't believe, that no matter what you show will not be successful. You have to let those people off the bus. So you're letting the people who have no belief, who will never believe in you and what you're doing. You have the next level that have to see proof of concept, and you have your early adopters, you have your core believers. So she said you create a system of collective belief going through one group at a time, and that's how she did it. And I share that in the book. It's some great advice.
Wow, that is powerful. What a practical way, like a systematic way to go about creating transformation from the inside.
Right. And that's, a lot of times they talk about painting the building. Just by painting the building, by painting the shed, by painting the barn, people start to see improvements. So they actually start to get excited about what's happening. And you'll see that with businesses. Hey, we got this win here. Hey, we got this sale. Things are looking up. And so you do want to highlight the successes. You want to showcase the real successes. But it's really important that you address the negativity that exists, the lack of belief. When William Bratton was the police chief under Rudy Giuliani, and I wrote about this in the book as well, they said that crime couldn't be reduced in New York. Well, we know years later that he reduced it. He was asked how he did it. He said, well, I met with my 5 bureau chiefs one-on-one, and I asked them one question. Do you believe that crime could be reduced in your area? 3 said no.
Wow.
2 said yes. He said, unfortunately, I had to fire 3 people that day. Why play the game if you don't believe you can win? So he hired the optimists, people who believed, and then set out on their plan. Now, you have to have a plan. Alan Mulally says that everyone has to know the plan, embrace the plan, and relentlessly work towards the plan. See, that's the thing. It's relentless optimism, relentless work towards a goal and plan that brings it to fruition. Duke University did research, and they studied optimists, and they found that they worked harder, got paid more, and were more likely to succeed in business, sports, and also politics, which is interesting. And what the researchers found was that the optimists, because they believed in a brighter and better future, they then actually worked harder to create it. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The researchers called it diluting, that they deluded themselves to working harder. I'm not a fan of that term, but because they worked harder, they then took the actions necessary and then created it. And so much of life is belief leads to action.
Wow. Jon Gordon is who you're listening to, my friends, jongordon.com. You can also follow him on Twitter, which I would highly suggest. He is one of the most popular tweeters out there and just spits off these like amazing little pearls of wisdom. At Jon Gordon 11 is his Twitter handle. So follow him and tweet him. Let him
Jon Gordon.
Yes,
yeah.
Jon Gordon. No H. The book is called The Power of Positive Leadership. It's a gem. All of his stuff is a gem. And man, Jon, just thanks for being a source, man, for being like a source, an initiator, an instigator, a catalyst of this light in the world.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it.
Man, I love that guy. I just think Jon is so fantastic, and I don't know. There's something about me personally that I think I struggle with what he's talking about. I think I'm so logical, so analytical, so rational, generally speaking, that to me, positivity has always seemed cheesy. It's always seemed fluffy. It's always seemed like this kind of, I don't know, just unscientific, unresearched, impractical. And, you know, Jon has always been this influence, I think, that has really helped convict me on it. And I think a lot of the leaders that I admire, when I look back, I go, yeah, they are positive. I think of, you know, like at Southwestern right now, Henry is one of our leaders, and he does that. He's very analytical. He's very realistic, but he's always looking past that. He's always talking about how the change is possible. And I think that is something that great leaders do. And it's just something that I have struggled with. And so Jon has been a great influence in my life. Plus, my brother coaches girls fast pitch softball, and my niece plays, on his team, and they're huge Jon Gordon fans. And so it's been great to get to know Jon. But I think going through that and going back through that interview, I realized that there are these 5 misconceptions that people have about positive leadership, or let's say it's 5 misconceptions that I have or had about positive leadership previous to, kind of talking with Jon in this latest book that he put together. And I think, he did a good job there of creating some distinctions and some delineations, at least for me, that were really powerful. And so I thought, hey, I'll share these with you because I think these are some of the things I've had to rewire my brain about, as just become educated on. So the first one is that we think often that positive leadership means like pie in the sky. It means like hunky-dory. It means like almost just this disregard for reality. And I loved what he was talking about, where he said, we confront the reality that exists, but we don't dwell on it, right? So being optimistic doesn't mean that you're like delusional, even though Duke sort of used that term in the research. It doesn't mean that you have a disregard for like the laws of physics and the way that the world sort of works, but it means that you don't dwell on it. It means that you move past it. And when Jon said it's dangerous to be a realist, it's dangerous to be a realist. And because here's why. People don't need help being more realistic. Right? Like, nobody needs more help being realistic. Nobody has a problem doubting themselves enough. Like, we all have natural doubts. We all have natural limitations. Our default is to think, oh, that's not possible, or I'm not good enough, or that's not going to work out. So nobody needs help with that. And certainly when we're complaining and we're contributing to that negative self-talk or that negative environment, we're not leading. Like he said, if you're complaining, you're not leading. You cannot be complaining and leading at the same time. And so it's not that you don't acknowledge that there's problems there, but it's that you don't focus on the problem, you focus on the solution. And I think that is so powerful. So it's not unfounded pie in the sky. It's just optimistic. It's looking for a way instead of an excuse. That's the way that Southwestern or the late Spencer Hayes would say it, is that there's two types of people in the world. There's people who are looking for a way, and there's people who are looking for an excuse. And I think realism is seductive because realism is an excuse dressed up as intellectualism. Realism is an excuse dressed up as intellectualism. So we intellectualize our excuse by calling it realistic. And the fact of the matter is, we're freaking scared. Like, we don't know if it's possible. We're not sure if it's possible. And so we're afraid to say, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we're going to go after that. Yeah, we're going to tackle that. Yeah, we're going to change that, because that's risky and that's hard and that's vulnerable. That requires us to put ourselves out there. And so rather than doing that, we say, hey, let's be realistic. Let's focus on what is realistic, because realistic is safe. And I love what Jon said when he said, being positive doesn't guarantee that you'll succeed, but being negative guarantees that you won't. And I think, so it's not pie in the sky. It's not at all pie in the sky. It just means you're looking for the way, you're looking for the solution. The second misconception that I realized that I had about positive leadership, and he came right out and he said this, was that you don't have to be an extrovert to be an optimist. Like, extroversion and optimism are not really connected at all. They're not the same thing. I think that we actually confuse those things a lot. I think that we mix them up. I think we mess them up, that we say, oh, they're extroverts, so they're positive, and he's an introvert, so he's negative. Well, it's not really, because optimism is as much what happens inside, optimist or pessimist is what happens inside of your own brain. It's not even something that's necessarily revealed other than through your self-talk. And I mean, your behaviors, obviously it is, but you don't have to be bouncing off the walls. You don't have to be the life of the party. You don't have to be gregarious. You don't have to be, flamboyant and you don't have to be that person to be positive. Now, you might be that person and be positive, but you might be quietly optimistic, right? Like you might be sort of a little more subdued, but we often make that mistake. And I think that it's important to understand that, because maybe you're an introvert, and so you automatically, and I'm an introvert, but you may not realize sometimes that's hard for people to believe. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy kind of writing and even the podcast in some ways, is because I feel like I can just be myself without having to worry about. There's something about just being in a room by myself that I don't feel like I don't know, maybe I'm being judged or whatever. So I am an introvert, and I think I have misappropriately often equated introversion with pessimism, and they're not at all the same thing. And people who are pessimistic don't change the world. Naysayers don't change the world. Tweet that out. Remember, I said let Jon know that you're listening, and let me know, right? So Jon's handle is Jon Gordon 11, Jon Jon Gordon, and then the number 11, like 11. So Jon Gordon 11, and tweet that out and let him know, because those are powerful ideas. Those are big ones. So that brings me to the third misconception that people have about positive leadership. And I think this is the one that probably the powerful, CEOs, the strong executive types, the commanding leaders, the sort of authoritative, maybe charismatic personalities, this is probably the one that makes them resist the idea of positive leadership, is that they think that positive leadership means weak or soft. They equate positive with being weak. Sort of the same mistake that we were making with introversion and pessimism is now saying like, oh, because it's positive, that means it's weak or it's soft. And I don't get the sense that there's anything about what Jon is saying there. And again, when I think about, like some of my personal mentors, like Henry at Southwestern, who is really the person that I'm most influenced by on a daily basis in terms of learning leadership from, because he's who I'm interacting with and he's leading me. There's nothing weak or soft about it, not at all. But I think that what Jon said is it is demanding. Positive leadership is demanding. It requires a lot. It pulls a lot. It pushes a lot. It calls you into being more than you are. It's demanding, but not demeaning. It's demanding, but not demeaning. And I think that, again, is a key distinction. And I loved what he was saying in that case study from Ford, that look, when the CEO of Ford is, and sorry, I didn't catch his name, or I don't remember what his name was, but when Jon was saying that, he came out and he said, look, wallowing is not an option. Complaining is not a plan, right? That's not soft. That's intense. That's direct, right? That's like slapping your people in the face. So you're loving them, but you're loving them. You're providing accountability with love. One of the things that I like to say, it's always helped me think about it, is you can always provide any level of accountability as long as you're willing to provide a higher level of love. You can provide any level of accountability as long as you're providing a higher level of love. And so but that's not weakness. That's not being soft, not whatsoever. And not allowing wallowing and not allowing complaining, right? That's strong. That's powerful. That's big. That's charismatic. That's forceful, but it's also positive. Whereas, demeaning is not. Pessimism is not. That's different. The other part that I was thinking about is, realistic goals. So coming back to this concept of realism, and particularly for a leader. One thought I had a while ago, I think I wrote this on one of my morning Instagram posts, was that realistic goals are for people with realistic work habits. Extraordinary goals or big goals require big work habits. Again, I think it comes back to this idea that realism is dangerous, because when you set realistic goals, right, then it requires realistic work habits. But big goals are for people with big work habits, and that's not soft. That's big. That's powerful. That's strong. That's positive. And that is a part of what positive leadership pulls you into being, is to working your butt off, right? Like, don't confuse being positive with, hey, I can just sit around all day and just, think good thoughts and things are going to happen. No, that's not how it works. It's that you dream and you find a way and you see how it's possible, and then you freaking work. Like, then you get off the couch and you you go to work, you pick up the phone, you knock on doors, you get out there and you hustle and you fight, and you do it because you're convinced that you can find a way. And that comes back to that Duke study. I think it's not that they were delusional. It's that because they thought it was possible, it empowered them to show up and do the work so that it became true. If you don't think it's possible, you never do the work, and so then it never becomes true. So the positivity part, you're leading with that, but you don't mistake this message whatsoever that you're not going out and working your freaking butt off. But it also, again, it sort of reminds me, we had Navy SEAL Joe on here. It's been a while since we've had him. We should try to get him back on the show. But one of my favorite quotes from Navy SEAL Joe was that, it's the mind, or the body can take damn near anything. It's the mind that needs conditioning. The body could take damn near anything. It's the mind that needs conditioning. It's our mind that is weak. It's our mind that needs to be trained. And positivity is a training regimen. Positivity is something that if it doesn't come natural to you, and if you're like me in that way, then you have to work at it. And it's a decision that you make, that this is the way that I'm going to live. I'm going to be that person. I'm not going to allow myself to be pessimistic. I'm not going to allow myself to always see the negative, to always see the worst case, or to not be paralyzed by those things. Maybe it's not so bad to see them, but not to be paralyzed by them, not to dwell on them. That is conditioning your mind, which is not weak or soft whatsoever. And in the realm of leadership, it's a tremendous service to teach people how to work their butt off and to help them condition their mind and to be demanding, not demeaning. Number four is, I think that often when we think of positivity or, positive leadership, we often think that it's safe. We think that there's something like, oh yeah, well, that's just kind of like safe and cushy. And in some ways, in one way, positive leadership sort of is safe because it's the better path. So it's better than the alternative. So in that way, it's safe because it works. It's the better choice. But being positive isn't safe, right? It's the opposite. Being positive is risky. It requires you to step out there and pursue something that is a stretch, to pursue something that is uncomfortable, that's outside of your comfort zone. I loved, there were, those two examples that Jon talked about here in this interview. The first one was, Dabo Sweeney, and that whole interview about, hey, we want to build a program that's like Michigan or that's like, whoever, yada, yada. And he says, no offense, but I want to build a program where they're saying that they want to be like, right? There's nothing inspiring about copying somebody else. There's nothing inspiring about doing what's already been done. What's inspiring is let's create something better. Let's create something new. Let's set a new record. Let's break a belief barrier. Let's explode a limiting belief. That's inspiring. That's exciting, and that's not safe, right? That's risky. That requires cojones, as we would say. It requires you to get out there and go after it. And so just because it's positive doesn't mean that it's safe. There's not cushy. It's outside of safety. It's outside of comfort. And I think that's a big distinction. And then the last one, okay, so this is number 5. And I can definitely relate this one back and see this in my own personal life, is that often when we think of being positive, or when we tell someone be positive, we believe that it means everything is going to work out. Right? Like I think this is where people get burnt out on being positive, because they say, well, hey, I was positive. I was enthusiastic. I did have good affirmations, and it didn't work out, man. Like, I was positive and I worked hard and I went after my dream, and you know what? My dream didn't come true. So the hell with being positive, because I did that, and you know what? It didn't work for me. And that's because we had the wrong understanding, that we had a misconception that being positive means that it's going to work out exactly as you planned. And that's not the case. right? That's not the case. Just because you were positive doesn't mean it's going to work out exactly as you planned. It does mean, I believe, that everything is going to work out, but not as you planned. It's probably going to be a different path. I mean, a lot of times it's a different path. When you work your butt off and you're positive and you go in that direction, even when it doesn't work out, it works out. Even when it doesn't work out, it works out. And that is the key to understand. As you pursue, you go down that hallway, and if you find that the door at the end of the hallway is locked, what you will find is one of the other doors down there that you couldn't see earlier is open, and that's the one that you're supposed to walk through. But if you don't hustle, if you don't fight, if you don't climb, if you're not positive, and if you stand still, then you never get to that place. So that is why you have to crush it where you're at. That is why you have to do everything you can with greatness, with power, with positivity, because it leads you to the next thing, even if it's not the thing that you thought it was gonna take place. And so whatever you're doing today, do it with greatness. Do it with excellence. Crush it where you're at. Do it with passion. Do it with power. And do it with positivity. Well, that about wraps up the Action Catalyst podcast for this week. If you haven't yet, please log in to whatever your favorite medium is to listen to the show, and both rate this podcast and leave a comment, as that helps new prospective listeners determine if the show's really a good fit for them.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and screenshot this episode to share with your friends on social media. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst, and subscribe to our video podcast on YouTube. Thanks for listening.